In the spring of 2024, Union Pacific had to cancel roughly 400 freight trains in a single week. Not because of weather, not because of mechanical failure, because there simply were not enough conductors to crew them. This is a job that pays over $100,000 a year, with full benefits and no degree required, and still nobody wants it. Something has gone fundamentally wrong with one of the last great blue-collar careers in America, and the real reason has almost nothing to do with money. Union Pacific's cancellation of 400 freight trains in a single week was not an isolated shock. Over the past 2 years, the same pattern has rippled across the country. In 2023, Norfolk Southern deferred over 1,000 carloads a day in the Midwest, while BNSF slashed nearly a third of its nightly runs through the Heartland Corridor. Official press releases cite crew availability constraints, but behind the corporate language, the reality is simple. Trains are sitting idle because there are not enough conductors willing to take the job or stay in it. The numbers do not add up at first glance. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the median annual wage for a freight rail conductor is $84,590. Top earners can clear $110,000. Full health coverage, retirement benefits, and zero college requirement are all on the table. In an era where the national median income hovers around $45,000, conductor pay seems almost recession-proof. Yet the applicant pool keeps shrinking. Vacancy rates at the Big Four railroads, Union Pacific, BNSF, CSX, and Norfolk Southern, have more than doubled since 2021. In 2024, the open conductor rate hit 7.4%, with time to fill stretching to 7 months or more. Even with $10,000 signing bonuses and fast-track promotions, the workforce keeps thinning. The paradox deepens when you look at what is at stake. The National Retail Federation warned that a 15% shortfall in conductors could force up to 7,000 freight train cancellations per week nationwide. On-time performance, once a point of pride in the industry, dropped from 85% before the pandemic to just 67% in late 2022. Every missed train means delayed grain shipments, stalled auto parts, and empty store shelves. The supply chain's backbone is fraying, not because the money dried up, but because the job itself has become a revolving door. So what is driving people away from one of the last six-figure blue-collar jobs in America? The answer is not found in pay stubs or bonus checks. It is buried in the lived reality of the work, a reality that money alone cannot fix. A generation ago, being a train conductor meant something different. In towns stretched along the rails, conductors were known by name. They wore crisp uniforms and carried a watch on a chain, a symbol of trust and authority. In some families, the job passed down like an heirloom. One retired conductor recalls his father and grandfather both working the same line through Illinois, a family legacy that paid for first cars, college tuitions, and mortgages. The railroad didn't just offer a paycheck, it offered a place in the community. Conductors led the parade on the 4th of July and handed out candy to kids waiting at crossings. Railroads recruited straight out of high school, promising steady work and a pension after 20 years. A young man could start on the caboose and, if he kept his record clean, retire as a respected veteran. Schedules were predictable. Shifts ran 12 hours, but there were weekends off and time for little league games or Sunday dinners. The union contract guaranteed a fair wage, health coverage, and 4 weeks of paid vacation. For many, it was the best job in town, a way up for the children of factory workers, farmers, and immigrants. Oral histories from the 1970s and the 1980s capture the pride. One former conductor describes the thrill of guiding a mile-long train through a snowstorm, knowing that every carload mattered to someone down the line. He talks about the camaraderie in the crew room, the sense that everyone, engineer, brakeman, dispatcher, was part of something bigger. The railroad wasn't just a company, it was a lifeline. People built lives around those schedules, and the job's security shaped entire neighborhoods. That world feels distant now. The same man who once handed his badge to his son admits he wouldn't recommend the job today. The uniform still exists, but the meaning behind it has faded. What was once a source of pride and stability now stands at risk, not just for workers, but for the communities that grew up alongside the rails. Union Pacific, BNSF, CSX, and Norfolk Southern. These are the big four that rule American freight rail. Together, they control nearly 80% of all freight tonnage. And they set the rules for how railroads run, who gets hired, and what the job of a conductor really means. Over the past decade, these giants have moved in lockstep, pushing a doctrine called Precision Scheduled Railroading, abbreviated PSR. On paper, PSR promises efficiency, fewer idle trains, faster turnarounds, and tighter schedules. The reality is a system engineered for maximum asset use, not for the people running it. PSR's playbook is simple and ruthless. First, consolidate yards, cutting the number of terminals and centralizing dispatch. CSX closed a dozen yards in just 2 years, while Union Pacific trimmed its peak yard count from 19 to 11. Then eliminate local runs and replace them with longer point-to-point trains. At BNSF, average train lengths jumped from 9,000 feet to over 10,500 feet. Norfolk Southern's adoption of the Top 21 plan brought a 38% increase in train miles per crew, squeezing more work from fewer people. Crew sizes shrank as a matter of strategy. CSX cut its workforce by nearly a third after 2015, slashing 9,500 jobs. Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern followed, each reporting workforce reductions of 7 to 15% within 3 years of launching PSR. These cuts were not just numbers on a spreadsheet, they meant fewer conductors, longer shifts, and more time spent away from home. The Big Four presented this to investors as a triumph: higher car miles per employee, lower dwell times, and billions in annual savings. But the human cost was buried in the footnotes. Every efficiency gain came at the expense of the people who kept the trains moving. The industry's new doctrine was clear: run longer, run leaner, and let the workforce absorb the pressure. For conductors, the job transformed almost overnight. What had been a stable, respected career became a test of endurance, with each year bringing fewer colleagues and more demands. The Big Four had rewritten the rules, and the fallout was only beginning. A conductor's life runs on a 4-hour clock. The phone rings, 2:17 a.m., 3:40 p.m., or in the middle of a family dinner, and the countdown begins. 4 hours to get ready, get moving, and report for duty, no matter how little sleep or how far from home. Miss the call, and discipline follows. Refuse too often, and the job is gone. The system calls it an emergency response. For those living it, it is a constant state of alert, where plans are tentative and rest as is a luxury. A 2023 Union survey reveals the toll. Over 70% of conductors spend at least one night a week in a motel, often far from their own beds. The average is 10 nights a month, 10 evenings of microwave dinners, 10 mornings waking to the sound of trucks on the highway. The company pays for the room, but not for the birthdays missed or the years spent living out of a suitcase. One conductor calls it simply never really being home. Schedules exist only on paper. Shifts stretch to 12 to 14 hours, sometimes ending with a bus ride to a distant rail yard and another wait for the next train. Days off vanish. More than half of conductors say they have gone a month without a guaranteed day at home. The union's data shows average tenure has dropped to just under 7 years, down from more than 13 years a decade ago. The industry's own burnout index now sits above 8 out of 10. The hardest part is not just the exhaustion. It is the sense of being a number, a buffer for the Big Four railroads as they flex staffing to meet the demands of precision-scheduled railroading, always waiting, always calculating how much longer they can last. "You make good money, but you pay for it with your life," says one veteran. The 2022 labor standoff showed that pay is not enough. Sick days, predictable rest, time with family. Those are the things slipping away, replaced by a 4-hour call and a life always on hold. September 2022. The clock is ticking toward midnight as union leaders for Smart TD and the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen gather in Washington, D.C. Talks with the Big Four railroads have collapsed. The sticking point isn't wages. Management has already offered a 24% raise, the largest in decades. It's the demand for a handful of paid sick days. Conductors want the right to call out sick without risking their jobs. The railroads refuse, arguing that even a few guaranteed days off would unravel the tightly wound schedules of precision-scheduled railroading. The standoff escalates into a national crisis. For the first time in 30 years, the entire U.S. freight rail system faces the threat of a coordinated strike. The White House intervenes. President Biden's emergency board steps in to mediate. The National Retail Federation warns that a shutdown could cost the economy $2 billion a day, halting 30% of all freight traffic overnight. Grocery chains brace for empty shelves. Chemical plants prepare to idle. The Department of Transportation drafts contingency plans to reroute critical shipments by truck, but the numbers make clear this is a fantasy. No other mode can absorb the volume. Union press releases flood the wires. Smart TD's statement reads, "No one should have to choose between going to work sick and keeping their job." BLET's national chairman calls the sick leave denial an insult to every railroader who kept the country moving through the pandemic. The railroads counter with warnings of irreparable harm to the supply chain. Headlines track the countdown. 12 hours to strike, then 6, then 3. In the end, Congress steps in, passing a law to impose a contract and avert the walkout. The final deal grants conductors just one additional personal day, far short of the original demand. The near strike exposes a deep fracture, an industry so streamlined that a handful of missing workers can threaten the entire economy. The paid sick leave fight isn't about money. It's about the limits of efficiency and what happens when a job's demands outstrip the basic needs of the people doing it. The paychecks keep rising, but the exits keep coming. In 2024, the Association of American Railroads reported that more than half of new freight conductor hires quit within their first year. By mid-2025, the industry-wide separation rate for conductors reached 57%, up nearly 20 points from a decade earlier. The average time to fill for an open conductor job now stretches past 2.5 months, and the headcount at the Big Four has dropped by a third since 2015. Even as signing bonuses climb past $10,000 and base pay pushes into six-figure territory, the pipeline of applicants has thinned to a trickle. For every 4.5 applicants per opening a decade ago, there are now fewer than 2. The numbers do not just reflect a hiring challenge, they reveal a deeper unraveling. Early departures are not coming from those who struggle with the technical demands or fail safety tests. They are coming from people who, after weeks or months on the job, decide that no amount of money can compensate for the loss of control over their lives. Internal union surveys show that 53% of new hires leave before their first anniversary, most citing burnout, unpredictable schedules, and chronic time away from family. The job's traditional appeal, a stable, middle-class income without a college degree, has been hollowed out by the reality of 24/7 on-call demands and weeks spent in motels far from home. Railroad executives have tried to stem the tide with bigger paychecks and flashier recruitment campaigns, but the effect is fleeting. The American Association of Railroads' own 2025 workforce report found that even after a 24% wage increase and expanded bonuses, vacancy rates rose to 8.6%. The message is clear in the data. The crisis is not about pay. It is about the cost of a job that asks too much and gives too little back in return. The conductor shortage is not a glitch in the system. It is a warning sign that the work itself has become unsustainable, no matter how high the paycheck. The shadow of automation hangs over the freight rail industry, shaping every career decision before a single shift begins. In 2024, the Federal Railroad Administration opened docket FRA 2014-0033, inviting public comment on a rule that could allow one-person train crews on selected routes. The filings stretch for thousands of pages, with railroad executives touting remote pilot technology and union leaders warning that even the hint of single-crew operations will gut recruitment. Union Pacific's 2025 petition for single-person crews on low-density lines was quietly approved, setting a precedent that alarmed workers across the country. BNSF and CSX have filed similar requests, each citing persistent conductor shortages as justification for further automation. In internal surveys, more than 60% of conductors under age 35 say they doubt the job will exist as a viable career by 2035. The prospect of remote-controlled locomotives and AI dispatch systems does not just threaten future jobs, it casts a pall over the present, driving away candidates who see no long-term path. The regulatory debate is not just about efficiency or technology, it is about whether anyone will choose a job that could be erased by software updates and a new rulebook. For those considering the conductor's chair, the uncertainty is as real as any pay cut or lost benefit. On a cold February night in 2023, a Norfolk Southern freight train derailed on the edge of East Palestine, Ohio. Dozens of cars, some carrying hazardous chemicals, left the tracks and burst into flames. The National Transportation Safety Board's preliminary report pointed to a failed wheel bearing, and it also noted the sheer length of the train and the fatigue of a crew stretched thin. Residents woke to headlines about toxic smoke and evacuation orders. For rail workers, the story was all too familiar, a derailment that exposed fewer hands on longer trains and little margin for error. Safety is not an abstract concern. In the wake of the derailment, union leaders and local officials warned that chronic crew shortages and relentless schedules put entire communities at risk. The NTSB's findings echoed what conductors had been saying for years. When railroads cut staff to the bone, the consequences do not stop at the yard fence. Every town along the line lives with the fallout. At the same time, the industry's recruiting pitch lands flat with a new generation. According to a 2024 Pew survey, 68% of workers under 35 say they would turn down a job that demands unpredictable hours and weeks away from home, no matter the pay. Flexibility, mental health, and time with family now outrank salary for most younger applicants. The old promise of steady work and a good pension has been replaced by a workplace culture that feels out of step with what people want from a career. The result is a growing disconnect, not just between railroads and their employees, but between the industry and the communities it is meant to serve. The workforce numbers tell a story that no amount of corporate spin can cover up. Since 2015, the combined conductor headcount at the Big Four has dropped from nearly 39,000 to just over 32,000, a decline of more than 17% in a decade. Attrition rates have climbed every year, reaching 8.3% in 2026, with vacancy rates edging past 9%. The average time to fill an open conductor position now stretches beyond 8 months, a figure that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. Railroad press releases, meanwhile, trumpet signing bonuses, $10,000, $15,000, even $30,000 in some markets, and splashy recruitment campaigns promising fast-track careers. The American Association of Railroads highlights a 24% wage hike and boasts about new wellness programs. But the data in annual reports and federal filings tell a different story. Even after 2 years of record bonuses, the applicant pool continues to shrink. For every conductor job posted in 2026, there are fewer than 2 qualified applicants. More than half of new hires quit within the first year. Charts in company investor decks show the line sloping downward year after year. Despite the industry's best public relations efforts, the gap between the numbers and the narrative is impossible to ignore. No matter how many bonuses are dangled, the core problem remains: a job that looks good on paper but pushes people out the door faster than they can be replaced. Today, a 6-figure salary can't mask the cost of being always on call, or the reality that efficiency has stripped away basic human limits. As the railroads scramble for solutions, the real question is not how much conductors are paid, but what workers are willing to endure. The future of freight and of work itself now turns on that answer. What is your line in the sand?